So good to have you join us today. Hello and welcome to Business Daily. I'm Lee Ji-yoon in Seoul. Before we get started, let's first get a glimpse of today's highlights. The government unveils a breakdown for next year's budget plan, but there are concerns that a rise in spending might threaten Korea's fiscal health. As Korea and Japan agree to start talks on a new currency swap deal in the coming months, we take a look at how this will help deal with potential volatility amid growing global economic uncertainties. These stories and more coming right up. The Korean government has laid out its budget proposal for next year, an amount double what it was 12 years ago. It's aimed at creating new jobs and finding new areas of growth for the future. Our Kim Min-ji starts us off.
Breathing life into the economy while maintaining fiscal soundness. That's the goal of the government's budget plan for next year. The total stands at 400.7 trillion won, or roughly $360 billion, up 3.7% from this year's budget. According to the proposal, roughly one-third will go to health and welfare, while the fields of culture, education, and national defense will also see a boost.
The focus is on job creation for the country's young population, as well as fostering new growth engines.
In terms of overall support for the employment market, the government is looking to increase spending in sectors deemed promising by job seekers and extend support to companies that offer flexible work hours. The proposal also includes plans to step up investment in R&D to foster new growth engines, including autonomous driving, augmented reality, and artificial intelligence. Another portion of the budget has been set aside to push up the low birth rate by offering more support for families. A bump in spending for defense and welfare has also been penciled in light of growing threats from North Korea and outbreaks of infectious diseases. But the heavier budget will have implications for the country's fiscal health, as the national debt to GDP ratio is expected to hit a record 40.4% next year. Although Korea's overall debt level is still much lower than that of other OECD member nations, experts say the pace of growth remains a source of concern.
During this administration, national debt is expected to hit $600 billion. That's a rapid rise of $200 billion. Although the government has emphasized fiscal soundness, there are areas that require spending no matter what. As the population gets older, their problem will get worse.
This is why experts point to reforms in the welfare system and specific measures to boost the poultry birth rate as crucial in securing long-term growth. They say recent budget supplements and a larger budget in size alone will not be able to resolve structural problems and instead challenge the country's fiscal soundness. Kim Min-ji, Business Daily.
Despite an agreement among Korea's three major political parties to pass a multi-billion-dollar extra budget bill by today, a conclusion remains at this point out of reach. Negotiations broke down this morning during the full assembly in which the bill was supposed to be approved. The ruling Saenuri party says the main opposition Minju party kept adding conditions that include long-contended issues of childcare services. But the Minju party argues that the ruling party blocked its efforts to provide financial help to citizens and accused it of giving billions of dollars in handouts to insolvent conglomerates. As of now, it's not clear whether the budget supplement will pass the assembly before the end of the day. And a turn for the worst for Korea's largest container carrier. Creditors for Hanjin Shipping have ruled out any new financial support, a move that will likely push the debt-laden shipper to file for court receivership before its current restructuring scheme expires on September 4th. Creditors, including state-run Korea Development Bank, had expressed regrets that the proposed self-rescue plan significantly fell short of the minimum $535 million they demanded. The shipper had debt worth $5 billion as of the end of last year. Shares of Hanjin Shipping plummeted by more than 26% during the trading day on the news. On the whole of the year, the stock of the world's eighth largest shipper has dropped 65%. And plans are out to improve and extend Korea's expressways over the next 4 years. The Transport Ministry is going to completely repave them while getting new safety facilities to drastically cut down highway traffic by 2020. Our Lee Ji-won has more.
Driving around Korea, a country notorious for its bumper-to-bumper traffic, could become a more pleasurable experience in a few years' time. The Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport announced Tuesday that it plans to use the latest smart technology to radically overhaul the road network and add an extra 882 kilometers of expressway by 2020. It'll expand the total length of expressway in the country to more than 5,000 kilometers by the target year. The plan includes making all bridges earthquake-proof and completely repaving old expressways rather than patching up sections as and when necessary. The ministry will also increase the number of roadside rest areas, increase a fog warning system, and allocate more snow removal equipment. The nation's toll system will also be updated. Toll areas will all be fitted with cameras to read and recognize plate numbers so drivers can pay the toll automatically without having to stop. The plan will also make more than 78% of Korea's total area accessible by an expressway, up from the current 71%. Nearly 96% of the entire population will also be able to access an expressway within half an hour from their homes. The government will spend around $33 billion from the nation's tax coffers on the project, while attracting almost the same amount in private investment. Lee Ji-won, Business Daily.
Apple is poised to be hit with Europe's largest tax penalty ever in the form of back taxes to the Irish government. The European Commission is said to have concluded after 3 years of investigation that Apple received illegal state support from Dublin, essentially a sweetheart deal that allowed the iPhone maker to unfairly reduce its tax bill and pay less than 1% of the effective corporate tax rate of 12.5%. With that, the tech giant is expected to be slapped with a tax notice worth billions of euros. Apple and Ireland said they will appeal any adverse rulings. This announcement comes just a week before Apple is set to reveal its new iPhone 7 at its autumn product launch event in San Francisco. Details of the new product have yet to be unveiled. As the name implies, a currency swap is an arrangement between two countries to trade in their own local currencies. And on Saturday, the finance ministers of Korea and Japan agreed to start talks on a new currency swap deal to hedge against growing global financial uncertainties. Take a look.
Korea and Japan first established a currency swap agreement back in 2001. It ran through February last year when the two countries let the deal expire at $10 billion. The Seoul-Tokyo swap line reached as much as $70 billion in 2011 before being downsized at a time when historical and territorial issues were adding strains to bilateral ties. And now, plans are in the works to resume negotiations on the bilateral currency arrangement. Since the 2008 financial crisis, central banks around the world have signed currency swap agreements with other countries as a means to minimize volatility in exchange rates. But with crucial factors like the U.S. Federal Reserve's looming interest rate hike, eyes are now on whether restarting talks on a currency swap with Japan will help Korea strengthen its readiness for turbulence in global markets.
And for more on this, Professor Yang Jun-suk from the Catholic University of Korea joins us in the studio today. Great to have you here.
Happy to be here.
All right, so amid growing external economic uncertainties, Korea and Japan agreed to start talks on a new currency swap arrangement over the weekend. How can a swap deal help dull the impact when the economy faces severe risks?
Okay, well, let's talk about the foreign exchange rate crisis for a bit. Why it occurs is that usually a country borrows money in hard currency like the US dollar, and then they find that perhaps they cannot pay the US dollar back. They don't have enough US currency hard currency on hand.
Okay.
And then the lenders find that the borrowing country does not have enough dollars, so they want to get their hard currency, their dollars, out while they can. They know that the borrowing country does not have enough dollars to pay them all back, so they try to get it out as quickly as possible so at least they can get theirs out. And by doing that, by every lender doing that, the country runs out of dollars very quickly, hard currency very quickly. Swap is one way of adding to these reserves, getting sort of potential reserves without actually having it in your vault. What the currency swap is between central banks. Is that, well, in a time of crisis, the central bank of the borrowing country can get hard currency from central bank of another country.
Okay.
So in exchange for their own domestic currency. So that can add to the foreign exchange reserves in a time of crisis.
Now, currently, then, which countries does Korea have currency swap deals in place?
Well, the most important one is probably the one that was created by the Chiang Mai Initiative, which is a subset of APEC countries. That's about 38 billion US dollars.
Wow.
And then the largest swap that we have currently is with China, 360 billion yuan. And then we have other swaps with Indonesia, UAE, Australia, which ranges in value from about 3.7 billion US dollars to about 8.7 US dollars.
So with all of these deals in place, how would seeking a new currency swap deal with Japan help Korea?
Okay, well, as I mentioned before, Korea does have a large foreign exchange rate reserve. We have about $371 billion. And Korea's short-term debt, the amount that Korea potentially has to pay back foreign borrowers in the foreign lenders in the very short term, is about $3 billion.
Okay.
So technically, we have enough money to pay them back. But if the situation gets exaggerated, amplified by speculators or domestic capital outflow that I mentioned earlier, then we're going to need more currency. And the swaps give us potentially more currency that we can use to try to stem the outflow.
Now, China, although for different reasons, has signed swap deals with nearly 30 countries since 2008. Has that helped the renminbi?
Okay, well, it doesn't seem to have helped renminbi so far.
Okay.
This is last year's data, which is the latest we have, but most of the global transactions as well as Korean transactions are still done in US dollars. And that includes our dealings with China. Even when we buy and sell goods or services from China, we do most of it in US dollars.
Okay.
So the renminbi swap doesn't seem to have helped that much, but still, I think it is helping a little bit, and potentially having these type of swaps can help calm the situation should there be a possible foreign exchange crisis.
Then looking at it from Korea's point of view, bringing in Japan, could we say that it's trying to reduce its dependence on the yuan within these arrangements?
Well, I think it's best to sort of diversify the countries that you can get currencies from. During a crisis, you want to draw as much resource as possible. Doing a swap with Japan as well as China is probably a good idea. But I think the one that you need to swap with the most is the U.S. Fed, with the U.S. Because most of our dealings are with U.S. dollars, most of our debt is in U.S. dollars. If there's a foreign exchange rate crisis, or if you want to calm the market so that there won't be a crisis, then you need to have a lot of dollars. Because when you borrow in dollars, you have to pay them back in dollars.
Right. But looking at past deals done by Korea with other countries, some say that these swap deals didn't really have the impact that many had wished for. So what are your thoughts on this?
Okay, well, I think the 2 points need to be mentioned. One, if the swaps and foreign exchange reserves are working properly, then they're not to be used.
Okay.
And the reason is that you want to calm the market. You want to show the lenders that you have enough hard currency, US dollars, to pay them back. And if you can reassure them of that, then they won't. The borrowers won't go into. The lenders won't get into panic.
Okay.
And then secondly, when you sign the swaps like these, well, potentially in some of the countries we also have to perhaps give them the won. And from Korea's point of view, that's risky.
Okay.
So I think both sides are better off if they use this as an insurance that can be used, but hopefully will not be used.
Now, looking ahead, what are some things that we should keep a close eye on as the two countries, Korea and Japan, start talks on a new swap line?
Okay, well, Japan really doesn't need to sign a currency swap with Korea.
Okay.
That's because most of their debt is in Japanese yen. So they can, if they have to, they can always print them. And then they also have a very large swap with the US Fed. So they don't have to come to us to get hard currency. In fact, yen is harder currency than Korean won.
Right.
So from that sense, from their purely economic point of view, Japan doesn't need to sign the swap with Korea, but Korea does need to sign swap with Japan. So it's an unequal relationship. And it's not clear what economics-wise Japan is going to get out of the swap. So there's fears that perhaps Japan will ask for something else in the political realm or cultural realm, which may be very sensitive.
We'll keep an eye on where these talks go from here on out. Thank you so much for coming in today, Professor.
Thank you.
And that wraps it up for today, but we'll be back tomorrow with more business news that matters to you. So don't forget to tune in then. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.